I'm joined today by Lyle Johnstone, who is running for State House of Representatives, District 26, Seat B. Without any further ado, Lyle, tell us how you got to this point. What's your journey so far?
Well, I've lived in Idaho six six decades plus, creeping up on 7 decades. So I was born and raised in Jerome County, on a farm for we had a farm for 20 years after I got married to my wife. Didn't want to play the money game any longer, and so we went different directions. I went into equipment sales and accounting, worked for small businesses. I've watched a lot of years, watched what I thought our legislators doing the wrong thing, growing government, not voting with or for the people, but voting for what turns out to be, as we figured out through the years, they work for corporations. That's who their constituency is. And so I was tired of complaining to them, not getting answers. They're telling me, well, you don't understand. No, I think I do understand. You're just not in the game here for me. And so I got tired of complaining to them and trying to get them to change, and decided that it was way past time somebody get in the race to do the right thing, to represent the people and not go to Boise to represent the corporations. So that's why I got into running for legislative seat, and have been part of a group around the Magic Valley area, which is from east to west, is about central Idaho on the southern border-ish. And it's a very blue region in the Republican Party. They've held the ground for a lot of years, and I believe we are absolutely going to see that change this year.
What makes it such a blue region? I mean, I understand, here in the Treasure Valley, we've got Boise, and big cities always turn blue for whatever reason. What makes your area like that?
Well, typically this area, until the 2020 census and the new legislative redistricting, right? Jerome County is, for quite a while, has been lumped in with Twin Falls County as a legislative district, but we actually got put in Jerome County with Lincoln County, Blaine County, and Jerome County form legislative district 26. Now we really do have Democrats playing in the game. But before that, it was strictly a Republican only votership, so to speak. Voters would only vote for Republicans. And so if you're a Democrat and you want to be elected, you just switched over and became a conservative Republican, and then voted like a Democrat because that's what you were and how you represented in the legislature. And so that's the ground they've held for years, is Democrats in the Republican Party fooling their friends into voting for them because they're nice people.
Now, obviously, you ran 2 years ago and came about, 5,500 votes short, it looks like. Um, do you feel like this year is going to be different?
I do. The incumbent has not impressed a lot of voters over many issues. Wide open borders is one of them. Not wanting to stop the mass infiltration of our nation. Another huge one has been not recognizing, not admitting to, and not wanting to stop pornography, child grooming in the libraries. And that has, and then along with comparing women to cows and understanding, yeah, that thing.
So, as you, obviously you've lived in your district for many, many years. You lived in that region. Uh, Between that and traveling around, knocking on doors, going to events, talking to people, what do you think are the unique challenges in District 26, and what are people saying? What are their concerns?
But the economy is becoming more of an issue. especially with the working people. So since I'm representing Blaine County as well, there's a segment of people there that the economy is a thing, but it isn't going to break any of them.
Mm.
They aren't going to quit remodeling or building houses. But there are the working people who are going to get hammered by this, and they're already beginning to feel it. Um, it's there's a Latino bakery in Bellevue, and basically the owner of the building they rent is trying to just keep increasing their rent to the point they will eventually push them out. They won't be able to stay. So that's kind of a typical thing that's happening in that upper valley, um, around Jerome and Lincoln. Things are tightening up. I think we feel it all over the state, and I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. And our state seems to, well, the people who represent us right now, two Democrats and one supposed Republican, think there's no end to spending money and growing government. And a bigger government is going to solve the issues. And, Ronald Reagan said basically the statement that should scare the begollies out of you is, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help.
So going into the legislature, then, if that's the number one issue, what can you do about it? Obviously, you don't want to grow government to solve the problem. What can you do in government, in the legislature, to make things better for people?
Well, obviously, it would depend on what committees I got appointed to, and it's one vote out of 105. But if we don't, as that 105 people, the majority of us don't get control of the facts and start to trim government back instead of growing it. I mean, health and welfare is like at $4.5 billion. It's outgrown education. We aren't educating children. I hear more and more and more people as I'm out in public in groups, face to face with people. They're unhappy with the government schools. Lots of issues coming about, and it seems fairly obvious to me why we have those issues, but we refuse to address them because most of our Republican legislators work for the IACI corporations, and they just don't want to talk about it.
So you mentioned school. That's obviously been a contentious issue. Last year, there was an education savings account bill that failed in the Senate. This year, there was a tax credit bill for private school tuition that failed in committee. Do you believe there should be some form of money following the child? Do you think that would improve things across the board?
I do. Government hates competition, whether it's thievery through taxes, which are semi-legalized, right? But they still hate competition. And so that's what I see with the three people who represent LD 26 or don't represent us now. They don't believe in competition. And I think that one of the things that would help straighten out government schools the fastest would be some outside competition. So yes, I would be open to some form of the money following the child.
Now, you mentioned, which committees you would be appointed to. Do you have any preferences? Do you want to sit on education, on JFAC?
There are more people pushing me because of my accounting work background, um, to try and get on JFAC. It's a big committee, and it's a mess, as you well know. It's a lot of work. So I would be open to that. I would also be open to education. I think we really need a change of methodology and curriculum in a big way.
So all of these things, schools, economy, growing government, spending, at the heart of it, I think, is a question that's being debated in the Republican Party, and that's what's the proper form of government, the proper role of government, that is. Uh, can we go back to day one of the Republic where the government's purpose was to protect life, liberty, and property? Or is it just is our society really just too complex now, and we need government involved in various areas, like even things like emergency medical systems, and making sure that water is properly maintained, and public education and all those things. Where do we draw the line, and how, if we need to shrink it back, how do we do that without just letting things fall apart?
Well, Idaho's constitution addresses that the state will have a free form of education, but that the intention of that seems to me to be pretty obvious, that that's from first grade through 12th grade. It doesn't include the launch program, and it doesn't include some other things that we have continued to expand. Um, and the methodology behind that, I don't buy that. And not necessarily just, we homeschooled 3 sons. And so that was a number of years. They were young when we took them out of government school. And I have to say, I think it was one of the best things we could have done for them. But we keep growing education. We keep growing the reach of government. Yes, culture is more complicated than it was, in 1776, 17 or 1800. Obviously, yes. But government has gone so far out of the intended scope. And largely, as population has grown, and we have bigger population centers like Boise, Idaho Falls, Twin Falls, they always tend to lean to the left side and they want big daddy government. Big government does not make a happier or more profitable citizenry. It just demands more taxes, and it has more regulation. And I'm for starting the reverse process in the state government to begin to roll that back. And so that should make Brad happy and all of his minions.
So along those lines, the more government takes over things, the more those things, whether it's education or welfare or anything, or business subsidies, the more they become dependent on it. And then once people are dependent on it, then you can't undo that program, even if it was meant to be temporary, because, well, what about all those people? The perfect example is Medicaid expansion. It's been going well beyond its projected costs, and at this point, it's paying for people who are working age, no disabilities. So when there was a bill this year in a committee to put some sideboards on Medicaid expansion, a bunch of people signed up to testify to say, no, you can't take this away. I depend on it. So how do you roll back government when so many people have become dependent?
It
As
seems
from both a logistical standpoint of how do you do it, but also from a political standpoint, because if enough people are dependent, then you're not going to last long in the legislature, and you're not going to be able to get anything done.
right. I think it's a slow walk backwards, because, as you've said, we've become addicted to it. But what got us here to start with, right? It was government getting involved in the processes that should have been free market, that has made healthcare unaffordable. So the government has been very cagey, or the corporations have been, St. Luke's, the medical mafia have been very cagey in how they've walked this through the system of government. In essence, every time government gets a little bit more involved, costs go up. And so when the costs go up, more people can't afford it, or they get disqualified, like the ACA. If you make this much money, you're disqualified to be in the ACA. You have to come back and do our system. And it's like, we have basically, through government, priced it up to the point that, well, we need government. And I don't think it's a simple process of walking it backwards, but nobody, not in the majority, nobody's trying to make that happen, or even to work on the system to undo it.
Yeah, like I said, that bill to just put sideboards on Medicaid expansion didn't even
Right.
get out of committee because enough people came in and said that they were, they needed it. And so nobody, well, very few had the courage to actually say, well, we still need to do this.
It's interesting, that the federal government's at least 35 trillion in debt, and I suspect it's maybe even 100 trillion bigger than that if we knew the facts of the matter. But it's $35 trillion in debt, which is over 1.5 times the national gross domestic product. I mean, we're bankrupt. We're broke as a nation. And we keep spending money. And Idaho is 40 to 43% dependent in its budget on federal money. We keep spending federal money like it's free. And the hog trough mantra that I hear all the time, well, if Idaho doesn't spend it, they'll give it to California. I mean, so when the federal government goes broke, or the federal government says, well, we can't afford to raise the debt anymore, now we're going to have to cut this back. So as an example, like you mentioned, Medicaid is about 80% to 90% paid for by federal dollars. So at $4.5 billion out of a $14 billion budget for this coming year, if we take let's just say 4 billion out of there of federal money, who's going to pay for that? Are we going to render the services anyway? Idaho doesn't have that kind of money.
No.
It can get it. Who's it going to get it from? You, me, every taxpayer in the state of Idaho will end up being like California, and you'll end up paying 30, 40, 50% income tax to the state of Idaho to bail out the system, or people will finally say, oh, golly, this doesn't work. We're going to vote you guys out and vote people in who will quit spending this money. So if we got started working on it now, maybe it won't be so traumatic when the feds just cut the teat off.
I'm imagining an Idaho version of Javier Milei from Argentina, just cutting everything off. Fuera.
Yeah, you're done. We're not sending any more money.
Federal money, federal oversight, that's a huge issue as well. Obviously, they get around the 10th Amendment by giving us money for various programs and then attaching strings to it, like this latest Title IX thing, talking about, gender pronouns in school. I've heard from a lot of legislators that they want to get rid of federal money to, maybe in education, for example, to replace the federal money with state money and then tell the feds to take a hike. But nobody's actually stepped up to do it. So I don't know, maybe there's a big lobby against it. I assume that's something you would support?
It is, yeah. We had a chance, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that our overrun would have basically bought the feds out of the education system. And that's one of the first places we should get them out of. The other thing is water. Lots of people whine about budgetary no votes from Senator Zeiderveld and some of the others. You don't defund anybody in the state government. What you're trying to do is send budget bills back to have them trimmed down, to get them into a reasonable perspective to quit growing that area. So I think two of the scariest positions or parts of government today control that the feds are rooted into are education and water. If the feds get rooted into our water policy, all of the lefty buddies who are in the legislature today, well, I'll tell you, well, it's been adjudicated and they can't do it. Well, they've done it in other states. They will take Idaho's water rights away and they will dole it out through federal policy to first in need, not first in time, first in right. And I live in rural ag ground south of Eden, Idaho. I mean, I'm in farm country, not in a subdivision. I love it. And one of the things that Nelson Hartkin, those people are talking about is we're going to put smart meters on your domestic wells because you guys are the reason that the aquifer is dropping so rapidly. Well, everybody that uses out of the aquifer contributes to that. But who is doling out more aquifer water? The government, the city government, the county government, the state government. And who are they doling it out to? Corporate sponsors through IACI and the governor and Bedke and that whole rhino tribe. And so we've got this oxymoronic thing going on. You know, those two are saying, yeah, let's put a smart meter on your domestic well. And when you pumped all the water you're supposed to pump, which is your household use in a half an acre ground on an acre lot or a 5-acre lot, only a half an acre out of that domestic well. Okay, so probably most people who live in rural Idaho probably are offending that regulation. Nobody's taught them that. And I guarantee you it isn't the domestic wells that's running the aquifer dry. What we have is an issue of state government legislators aren't in reality. They're taught by somebody who gives them a sheet of talking points.
Well, that actually brings up a question I've been asking some folks. Obviously, you have your areas of expertise where you'll be able to know what's going on when you read legislation or write legislation. But there are other areas that you'll be called on to vote, and it could be a really complex issue that you need to learn about. How do you go about figuring out how to vote on something that is, a complex issue? Who would you talk to? Who would you, take advice from? What resources would you use?
Read the bill.
Oh, yeah.
That's an you know, my competitor often says, "Oh, the first part of the bill is good, really good, sounds really good, and then when you read the backside of the bill, it's really bad." Well, I seldom find bills that are that way. I mean, in the last 4 years, I have read a ton of legislation or proposed legislation. Most of it can be figured out just simply by reading it and doing some research on the subject. The next step would be to go to fellow legislators who have expertise in that area. I'm an ag guy, but my ag knowledge is not as current as some other people's ag knowledge. So go to more current farmers that live around me, go to legislators who are more current in the ag world than I am. The last, contrary to popular belief, we don't work for Idaho Freedom Foundation, and I won't work for the IACI lobbyists. I just simply won't.
That being the case, how do you, maintain a grounding with your constituents? How do you make sure you're listening to them? Because, the moment you walk into that building in January, you'll be surrounded by, people with green name tags, and they're all usually very smart people. They're experts in their area of expertise, and so I'm sure they have compelling arguments. But how do you remember to how do you maintain a connection with the people you're actually working for?
So while I've been campaigning, my business cards, my rack cards, my website has my phone number on it. It has my email address. Basically my ears are open. People can get a hold of me virtually whenever they want to discuss concerns. And I try to stay in front of people and keep them informed of what's going on. So I see this as a believer that I have to honor God first. I have to protect the constitutionality of the two constitutions and what they say to do or not to do. And then after that, we can get down to the grassroots. What's your input? What do you like about this, or what do you not like about it? And I would really encourage the citizenry to be more engaged and watch over your legislators and what they're doing. There's a group of us down south here in central Idaho who have put out a lot of information on bills that have been voted on and how legislature voted on it, the local legislators, how they voted on it. And that knowledge has made people think that they have some really unfavorable folks who are supposed to be representing them, but they aren't. The other problem is they need to be more vocal and be more engaged with their legislators and let them know what their opinions are.
I want to circle back to we were talking about federal overreach, and one of the big issues that's in your region is the Lava Ridge Wind Farm, which would would be a federal project, partnering with various power companies, put up a bunch of windmills, and then send the electricity down to California to people who want to pay for the feeling that they're saving the earth. And that's one that everybody I've talked to over the last year, they all oppose it. The governor opposes it. Our senators oppose it. Even Democrats in the legislature have stated that they oppose it, and yet the federal government still holds all the cards. They can do it if whatever they want. What's the current status of that project and the resistance to it, and what can the legislature actually do to maybe reclaim some state sovereignty?
Well, so my competitor and Lance Clow 2 years ago ran, I believe it was HJR4, but it was basically a resolution in the House, and then it went through the Senate as well. And it's words on paper, right? So let's remember that resolutions are words on paper. And do they have power? Well, just a little bit. They're not law, they're not statute. And so we're against Lava Ridge. What people need to understand all across Idaho, Lava Ridge it's the doorway to a hellscape all over Idaho. Anywhere there's Forest Service or BLM ground that is managed by those two agencies, okay, they don't own it. We own it, the taxpayers. They keep trying to tell us they own it, it's their ground. Really, it's taxpayers' ground and they manage it. If Lava Ridge happens and those windmills go in, basically every county in the state of Idaho, other than maybe Ada and Canyon, right? But the more rural areas or the woods or the desert are all going to have green energy projects on them. If you look at a green energy BLM map, every region in the state has an orange dot on it. And that orange dot is set up for solar panels or wind turbines. So whether or not Lava Ridge happens, it is the doorway for this thing to just blow up and go clear across the state. There's 7 to 10 projects just in the Magic Valley, that central southern region of Idaho, that are just waiting at the gate, kind of like a horse race. Once they open one gate and let the first horse out, all the rest of the horses want to run. And then they open their gate. That's what's going to happen if this thing is allowed to go through. And my opinion from the county to the state is nobody's really manned up to do anything substantial to keep it from happening. And quite frankly, I don't care if it goes to Supreme Court. And it has to be tried whether it's constitutional or not. There's no need, there's no reason to have green energy other than for wealth transfer, and eventually goofy people like Simpson who want to tear out the greenest kind of energy Idaho has, hydropower, that's been established for decades, that we're not putting any more carbon into the system, which supposedly is the problem, at 0.04% of the atmosphere. That's a sales speech of fear that has been placed into the public mindset, and everybody believes they're going to die from climate change. It isn't CO2. It's just another billionaire scam running through the federal government and the state government. And we've got a governor that is part of the Western Governors Association and the decarbonization of Idaho. It's absolute insanity. We'll end up with no farms, no ranches, and no food. That's where it's going to go if we don't plug the hole on this thing. And I think the SWIP line, which probably most of Idaho doesn't even know about other than Jerome and Twin Falls County. There's currently a 300 kilovolt line that runs from basically Las Vegas within a mile of my house. And now they want to build two 500 kilovolt lines beside that 300 kilovolt to tie into the midpoint substation that sets in between Jerome and Shoshone off of Highway 93. And another project they're trying to get going, they just bought 200 acres of farm ground from a farmer I know out there by that substation, is to build a battery farm. And that's another absolutely insane. I mean, I get the idea. This is all good. We just put new D cells in it and it runs, but that isn't. If it catches fire and melts down, where do all the toxins go besides into the atmosphere and into the ground? And that whole area of Lava Ridge is very porous lava rock. So 500 days of doing nitrate, diesel, and dynamite explosions, that the poison from those explosions are going to leach down through the lava rocks into the North Snake River Plain aquifer, where all of us get our drinking water from. Cities, factories, domestic wells in the country, and some irrigation water comes out of there. The whole thing it's a sales job of Al Gore proportion. It's just foisted on us by basically the World Economic Forum.
So do you think if enough like-minded people are in the legislature that you can stop it?
I think there are other states who have stopped it. Obviously, Idaho has a different problem than some of the states in the eastern part of the United States have stopped it because they're predominantly all privately owned ground within the state. The federal government doesn't have any significant ground. And I'm not sure where we went wrong in the constitutionality of the federal government isn't supposed to own land other than for military bases and so forth. Mm-hmm. 63 or 4% of Idaho is controlled by federal government agency. I think it's time that Idaho manages those lands and basically invites the federal government to leave as far as at least management goes.
Well, I know that's something that was debated a few years ago and it didn't seem to go anywhere. So maybe it's a discussion we need to have again.
I think it's a continual discussion that needs to happen quickly. And really, I go back to the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Most people know who that is. The local branch of that in Idaho is IACI, the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. And most of the 500 or so lobbyists that we have registered to roam the halls of the legislative palace work for those corporations predominantly. There are a few good lobbyists up there, but it's like a couple of handfuls. The rest of them are working against citizens in Idaho. And there's way too much support, in my opinion, money support and physical, mental input. When those people become your bill professionals and the legislators are going to lobbyists to find out how they should vote on bills, then they work for them. They don't work for us.
Well, I appreciate your time today. Is there anything else we haven't covered that you want to make sure that you speak on, or just closing thoughts?
Idaho needs to protect its children, number one,
Hmm.
and we aren't doing that in the education system. That hole is wide open in that dam, and it's leaking badly. It needs to be stopped, whether it's Horn and libraries, DEI, SEL, the whole thing. That is not what education was designed to do. But because we take federal money, we have litter boxes in some bathrooms in some schools for furries. Um, Maybe we just need to call the dog pound and have them picked up. Um, Idaho better. I believe the people that I know in government that I can trust, the people outside of government that I can trust who are very politically involved and knowledgeable. If we don't change the legislature this year, people, you probably are living in Idaho, Colorado, California, Washington, Oregon in the next 2 years. This is a really vital election to change who represents you instead of the predominant leftist. We need to tighten up the ship. And we need PCs elected who are constitutional conservatives as well, all across the state. Um, the Clark and lunatic bunch that is out putting money in to put far left PCs on county committees need to put a stop to that, because that changes the flavor of what kind of representation you get out of each county to run for any office within the city, county, or state level. It's a really serious situation. People need to wake up and come to the table and get informed. There are plenty of places to be informed. Think Liberty, Idaho, as an idea. You can go get 4 score rankings off of 4 different sites of how your legislators vote. And most of them are really poor, not representing the citizenry. They're really good at representing the World Economic Forum and the big corporations in Idaho. Kelly Anthon often says, well, they're for business. Well, they're for really, really big business. They're not for the mom and pop hamburger stand, the hair salon, the people who clean houses for a living. They're not for those people. The regular working citizens who own small businesses. We need to be informed of who's your friend in Idaho and who's not.
Lyle Johnstone, running for House of Representatives, District 26, Seat B. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate your time.